OK, je pense qu'on va commencer. Est-ce qu'on est prêt en AF? Everybody ready here? Good to go. All right, we will begin. Welcome everybody to this public consultation meeting for the medical clinics draft bylaw number 1601, entitled Bylaw to Further Amend Zoning Bylaw 1303, Medical Clinics and Doctors' Offices. Welcome to this public consultation. Thank you for coming. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us here tonight. The purpose of this public meeting is to present the draft bylaw number 1601, entitled Bylaw to Further Amend Zoning Bylaw 1303, Medical Clinics and Doctors' Offices, and to hear from anyone who wishes to ask a question or comment on this draft bylaw. All the comments will be reviewed by council, and if necessary, changes may be incorporated into the second draft bylaw. Mr. No from our urban planning department will present the draft bylaw. Then our city clerk, Maître Ferland, will briefly explain the legal process that we must follow in amending a planning bylaw. Finally, we will have a question and comment period for those present in the chamber tonight with us. And we will only be taking questions on this issue specifically. This is not, if you have other questions that you want to raise on any various number of issues with the public, you can come, those are for the general council meeting. So I just wanted to sort of clarify what the process is for tonight. And I also would like to clarify, I was on council when this bylaw was amended. I was a councillor. I wasn't the mayor at the time, but I was on council. I see we have two former council members here as well. And there has been some questions, why the change, why was it there in the first place? How did this come to be? And it was really a reaction at the time to the MUHC, which was a massive project, obviously a massive provincial project, had huge implications, not just for Westmount, obviously for the entire island of Montreal, for the region. And there had been some concerns with the planning at the time with the allotted space for doctors' offices within the hospital. And at the time, the reporting was that there was a serious lack of doctors' offices within the hospital. And there was some concerns as to how that would affect the Victoria Village, what was the impact of the hospital going to be on the Victoria Village. And 8 years later, since the MUHC has been open, I think we can all, I certainly am glad that it's within our community. And I think many people are as well. And we also know that the impact has not been a negative one in terms of doctors' offices within the Victoria Village. This is also a very difficult bylaw to enforce and to keep track of for our urban planning inspectors. So that was the thinking at the time. That was the reasoning for this bylaw back in 2013. I guess it began in 2013. I think it was actually passed in 2014. So we want to hear from you tonight. And we've heard from lots of doctors over the years. We've heard from residents over the years. We've heard in particular when the Hillside Medical Clinic closed because the building was sold and it became housing, it was essentially impossible for that clinic to move within Westmount. The Victoria Village, where there would have been space for that, did not allow for that. So that was a problem for many, many residents of Westmount who had doctors within that clinic. So that is why we were here tonight. So Mr. No will present the draft bylaw and some of the details around that. And then we are happy to hear from you with any questions or comments. And then Maître Ferland will explain the process of what's to come. So I will hand it over to Mr. No and let Councillor Peart, the Urban Planning Commissioner, wants to add anything? Any councillors? No? Okay. So we will begin with Mr. No. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening, everyone. My name is Frédéric No. I'm the Director of the Urban Planning Department. So I will be presenting you this presentation with the object of the draft bylaw. It should not be long because it's a rather simple modification. And the object, actually, there's only two items that are aimed for this draft bylaw. First of all this process is planned by a law, the Loi sur l'aménagement et l'urbanisme, and there's legal steps to go through the process. So I will just quickly explain the past steps that were done. First of all, there was the adoption of the first draft bylaw on April 3rd. Then a public notice was published on April 25th. And finally, we're here tonight on May 9th with this public consultation meeting. My colleague, Maître Ferland, will tell you at the end the next steps. Madame Mayor explained very well what was the setback, the situation that led to this modification in 2014. So I will go pretty fast, but there was concern relating to possible overflow of medical clinics and doctor's office near the mega hospital under construction back then. So by precaution, the council added two items to the zoning bylaw. Those two items are those which are proposed to be repealed in this bylaw. So those two items were to limit the total number of medical clinics or doctors' offices in the targeted areas. The areas are those highlighted in orange, 6 areas, 6 zones that is defining Vic Village, so Sherbrooke and Victoria. The second item was to limit the total floor area for each clinic. It brings issues well, there's concern about the actual bylaw because the quota is reached for a long time. So the maximum is set to 35 clinics for Victoria Village. It's always at the top. Sometimes there's clinics closing, but as soon as it's closed, there's a new one. There's almost a waiting list. So it's at the top. Certainly, there will be a need for some more clinics. The other thing is the total floor area that is allowed. It's maximum 600 feet, which is actually not a big size for a medical clinic. All of this, as Madame Mayor said, was to respond to concerns back then, but now we're almost 10 years later, and we have to admit those concerns are not what we see now. So we feel comfortable to bring back the bylaw as it was prior to 2014. And it's the same situation as for the other commercial zone in Westmount, who do not have quotas and do not have maximum floor superficie. As I said, the object of the bylaw is to repeal the two items, the one for the quota and the one for the maximum area standards. More specifically, we have to repeal items in the grid, the zoning grid for the 6 concerned zones. So the text you see in the last paragraph you see is what would be repealed. And that was what was added in 2014. That's all for my presentation, Madame la Mairesse.
Merci beaucoup. Maître Ferland, est-ce que vous avez quelque chose à ajouter?
Oui, Madame la Mairesse, je vais vous expliquer les prochaines étapes. Donc, la prochaine étape pour l'adoption du projet sera l'adoption d'un second projet de règlement par le Conseil. Suite à cette adoption-là, en fait, il y aura un avis public qui sera publié et les personnes habiles à voter auront 8 jours pour transmettre au greffe une pétition. Cette pétition-là doit être signée par au moins 12 personnes pour être valide dans une zone. Dans la mesure où le greffe reçoit une pétition, il y aura ouverture d'un registre et les personnes habiles à voter des zones contiguës au projet pourront venir signer le registre. S'il y a suffisamment de signatures, le Conseil, pour adopter le règlement final, devra aller en référendum. So the next step, Madam
Those are the
Mayor,
next steps.
yes, the next step, Madam Mayor, is the adoption by the Council of a second draft bylaw. After this, there will be a public notice for the people who oppose to the project that can sign a petition. So we need 12 persons in a zone to be valid, for the petition to be valid. And after that, if the city clerk receive a petition, there will be a registry. So if there's enough people who sign this registry, we will have to go by a referendum if we want to adopt the project.
Okay, merci beaucoup pour les détails. I hope that is clear to everybody about what the next steps are and how you can proceed and how you can be engaged in this. I think it's also important to point out that it is not just, doctors' offices are not just limited, like the definition is not just limited to GPs. So what is also limited here are, acupuncturists, speech therapists, psychologists, that type of thing. So that has been part of this cap of 35 that has been in the Victoria Village area for the past couple of years. So I just wanted to clarify that. Do we have anything else? The floor area is 600 square feet maximum with a cap of 35, which we were at 35. I think when this bylaw was put into place, I believe we already were at the cap. So some doctors that, there had been an acupuncturist in the Vic Park building that had to move because Vic Park, renovated and became something else. So when that person moved, when that clinic moved, they were unable to fit what they needed into the space. They still had a permit in it, but they could not find a space under that 600 square feet. So it made things very complicated there. And certainly I don't think anyone's unaware of the challenges for getting a GP or getting a family doctor, a pediatrician. So we don't want to be limiting that necessarily. And we're aware of, space constraints and traffic and things like that within the Victoria Village. So that is some feedback on that. Do you have a list of, I don't know if we need to list what they are, but the medical clinic list is fairly exhaustive in terms of what's considered a medical clinic. Donc, on va commencer avec des questions, des commentaires. Si vous avez des questions, ça c'est le temps. If you have a question, you can come to the mic and just state your name and where you live, and then we'll take the questions from in the room first, and then we will go to questions online. Welcome.
Good evening.
So you have to just let us know your name.
My name is John Chen. I'm a physician. I'm an ophthalmologist. I reside on number 4 Belvedere in Westmount.
Welcome. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. I have met with Mr. No, and also I have talked to one of the council members, Jeff Shammy. He's not here today regarding my particular concern. But before I go into my own concern, I just want to address whether I want to understand something so I know I'm asking the correct question. You mentioned in your introduction, Madam Mayor, that this bylaw was introduced to limit the number of physician offices in the Victoria Village. But my particular property that I'm interested in listening to is outside this area, but I understand with Mr. No's presentation that it will apply to all zones within Westmount.
So there's no cap on the number of clinics outside of the Victoria Village, just in the zones that were highlighted there, which is basically Claremont to Victoria on Sherbrooke, and then Victoria from Sherbrooke down to St. Catherine Street. So that was the zone that was affected by this bylaw change in 2014.
And not on every. not on anywhere else.
And it didn't cap what was restricted, what has always been restricted is doctor's offices on ground floors, which I think is the question that you had, right?
Yes.
Yes, I'm familiar with this issue. So
Yes.
that's a separate one, which we won't address tonight. But I know that Mr. No has been speaking to you, and I'm happy to hear any information that you want to share. You can also share with me, and we can discuss. But
At another occasion.
At another occasion. But if you have an opinion on this subject, we're happy to hear it, especially since you are a physician.
On this particular subject regarding the zone that was outlined on Victoria and Sherbrooke, I think I'm all for the revocation of the said bylaw.
Okay.
That's all I have to say.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you. I'm going to leave now.
Okay. I won't take offense. Many people leave after they ask their question.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Michael Wertheimer. I'm a resident of Somerville Avenue, 91. And I would like to actually not only ask question, but actually make a statement. And my statement is somewhat, perhaps sounds a little brutal, because it's basically saying that this whole premise lacks reality and transparency to a significant extent. Let me explain why I'm saying this. First of all, the 2014 bylaw was brought in 1456 to preempt parking and traffic congestion. Well, let me tell you that living on Somerville Avenue, which is exactly at the end of ends on this building that we happen to see, which is a very large block that belongs to a major actor in commercial real estate holdings here in Westmount. I can already see that that block has particular significance in this whole undertaking here, but I'll come back to that maybe later. But the actual situation regarding parking and traffic is, in fact, it has become a lot worse in spite of the mitigating circumstance as you interpret it. I think there's another interpretation regarding the super hospital, because there's now major activities taking place. The LIS is a major development which has not shown its impact yet, but there will be several hundred new residents or residences, each one have several occupants, which is just outside Westmount borders, but which will have a major impact on Westmount parking and traffic, certainly in our sector, which is on the extreme southwest corner, exactly where that is located. There's another initiative afoot, which is has a lot of parallels with what we're discussing this evening, which is the rezoning of the de Maisonneuve property, the Chateau rezoning, which is still in limbo. But if that went ahead, it would also, as we have learned from many words that were published in the Independent, will have major impact on parking and traffic. So my view, if I may express it very frankly, is that the village, if anything, is probably in worse shape than it was in 2014, and it will soon be in much worse shape on account of Liz. And also another initiative which has in fact materialized on account of the super hospital. If anybody has walked along de Maisonneuve west of Claremont in recent times, you will notice that there's a lot of empty lots. There's a lot of buildings which are deliberately being abandoned or have been abandoned. And all of these are being earmarked presumably for doctors' offices or for, let's say, medical spaces or associated spaces which will service in some way, shape, or form the MUHC. So in other words, the impact didn't happen in the last 9 years, but it's going to happen in the next few years. And it's all going to land on our doorstep because people who will park in Montreal are, we all know that parking rules in Montreal are taken very seriously. I wish I could say that for Westmount, at least in our sector. My initial statement that I think this proposition lacks logic and is against the facts is well brought out by these three factors: the LIS, the possible change of the Maisonneuve rezoning, and the changes along the Maisonneuve Boulevard. So what I'm humbly proposing is that this whole undertaking should be scrapped. We have spoken to many of our fellow residents in the village who share that opinion. I'm sure we will be able to come up with, in a matter of 24 hours, with enough signatures to come up with a petition. And you can bet on your bottom dollar that that's going to happen. Finally, I'm a little cynical about having seen precisely that photograph of that building, because my question was, could it possibly be that this very large owner of commercial real estate in Westmount, the name starts with a C, but I won't mention who it is, who happens to own that 345 building, that they might have had a little bit of influence on this whole process? I leave that question unanswered, but it buzzes around in my mind for several days already. Thank you very much for your attention. By the way, that's my question was, could there possibly be some link with this new initiative?
So if you're asking me if we are doing this to benefit Cromwell, no, we are reflecting on this bylaw that was put in place to deal with a specific issue at the time with the MUHC coming into the community, and hearing from many doctors within the community that this was an impediment to them being able to serve residents within this community. And it is, to my knowledge, I don't think there is, certainly there's no other area in Westmount that has a cap on medical clinics. And I don't know of any other community that actually has this type of cap. When it comes to parking, we can have all sorts of creative, pardon? Go ahead. When it comes to parking, we can have some creative solutions like that was done around the WRC, as well as the SHAR, where you had a specific color for your ticket, or your sticker, because the parking for residents on the street that don't have driveways or parking aprons on their property, they obviously park on the street. They have a red, so there are resident only zones as is. We can expand those. We can also add a colored sticker to that area like we did for the SHAR, because people who live on Mount Stephen and Springfield and Metcalf were having a very hard time parking around there because of a lot of the events. So they have an orange sticker. The people that live around the WRC were having a hard time parking and they have a blue sticker from that sort of evolved out of the construction of the WRC. So that's certainly something that we can look at, but I think, urban planners and people that really, work on developing commercial space, developing urban areas and commercial sectors, which this is. Victoria Village is there's a residential component, but there's also a commercial sector that we want to be vibrant. And for it to be vibrant, we want every office to be filled and all the stores to be filled. And we have a very high vacancy rate right now in the Victoria Village. Yeah. So I would, I hear your concerns about parking, and that is obviously one part of this issue, but it is something that we can address with resident only specific zone specific parking, like they do in the plateau, where you have a number, like we've done in other parts of Westmount. So anyone else want to add to that? No?
My name is Marielle Audet Wertheimer. I live on Somerville Avenue, 91. And I have, you mentioned that you want to revive the village, but those stores that are empty because the rent is too high, it's not going to change. What we're going to have, it's clinics that are going to bring more cars. And, we know that when you go to the doctor, doesn't mean that it's going to be 5-10 minutes, might go to 1, 2, 3 hours. So, I mean, and when you talk about doing zoning and for parking, already the parking is so badly enforced. The green sticker are supposed to be for 4 hours. People stay there, come in the morning, stay there all day, never get ticketed. That is not be, and we've been told by the agent, we have been told to be lenient, from 3 o'clock on, there is no more watching. There is no more enforcement of the parking. So, I mean, we compare Montreal, you talk of the plateau, but there they are having, even MDG next to us, people are going around and giving tickets, but not in our area. And, we're being told calls. That's not our job to watch what's going on, but there is no enforcement. So that is going to make it even worse. Already we have to turn around to find parking and, we see cars that are parked without stickers and we don't find a spot and we pay for our sticker. So, what are you going to do about that? We're going to have even more cars then. And, there are not only one car per household. Some houses have more than one car and there is no space. So I would like to know what is your solution? Thank you.
Well, I think I just explained it before in terms of a zone specific area. I too live in the Victoria Village. I'm well aware. We have 2 cars and 1 parking spot. So we managed to find a spot for the second car, which we were well aware when we bought our house. It had 1 parking spot and we have 2 cars. So that's a choice that we made. But I can tell you, I don't think I've ever had to park more than probably 200 meters from my house. Okay. Any other questions in the room? And then we'll go to questions online if there are any. Mr. Martin.
Madam Mayor, I did not bring any guns today. That was Sunday. My name is Patrick Martin. I live on the Boulevard 3166. I used to be on council, for the record, for those listening, and I'm an engineer and a planner. I respect very much the difficulty of your job. I know that it's a hard job to represent the entire city. You only hear from critics usually who write letters and emails. You rarely, I remember from my 12 years here, you rarely get someone writing to say you did a wonderful job, even if you do a wonderful job. So I'm quite respectful of that. Council, of course, represents the entire community, not just the homeowner who might live next door to a project and is bothered by it, nor do you only represent the developers who want to develop projects in the area. You are looking at the global picture on behalf of all the citizens of Westmount. So I get that, and that's an important responsibility that you have. On the Victoria area, which I understand Mr. Wertheimer's comment that it extends all the way to the 4898 Claremont as, ancillary project, which they're kind of related a little bit. There has been a critic in the newspaper who was saying that anybody opposed to this is just NIMBY, And so I'm here to say that I live 2 kilometers from the village, and I live at the extreme other end of the town. So nobody can say that my comments today are NIMBY. I understand commercial real estate is going through a tough time across the country. With COVID, people started staying home. They didn't come back. A lot of empty spaces. Westmount has it, and the entire country has it. It's a real problem. And anybody who invested, by the way, in a real estate right or whatever is in trouble right now. It's interesting that the Chateau Maisonneuve project wants to convert commercial space to residential, even though the Liz project is next door and will have 325 units, I think, of which only 20, I understand, are for severe health problems. So there's 300 units that are people living independently, 300 units of maybe 500-600 people that are going to come on stream soon. So that has to be taken into consideration. 10 years ago, when I was sitting there, why did we do this? Parking was one of the issues, but for me, it was a little more than that. My concern is not just the parking, but the whole retail of Victoria, which is precious to us as our little village. And we've seen what happened to Green Avenue, which is not doing well and has had a lot of medical clinics in the Westmount Square, but apparently they left last night or something. But and there were too many financial institutions, so it killed the retail side of the street at the time. So to me, a medical clinic is not usually just a doctor and a receptionist. It's usually 2 or 3 doctors. There's maybe a nurse practitioner. You know, as you say, 600 feet is not enough for a medical clinic. So a larger clinic would normally have a pool of people, and if somebody's sick, there's always someone else there. That's what you need in a clinic. You don't want to have it too small. I understand that. But it means the average doctor, I would say, sees 5 people an hour. Is that fair? And so, and you know, the nurse practitioners also see people. So if there's a clinic with 4 or 5 people in it, and they're each seeing 5 people an hour, what I don't know from what you're proposing is how many clinics do you think will come out of this, and how many doctors and medical practitioners will there be? We could take that and multiply by 5 and multiply by 8 hours, and you know, if there's 50 doctors, what is my number here? 50 doctors and nurses that are moving patients leads to 2,000 people per day. 100 doctors and nurses is 4,000 people per day. I don't know what the answer is, so I don't know if you have done the study behind this proposed bylaw change to do some calculations about that and see what the impact is. I have no idea what it is, so I'm just throwing numbers out here. But I do know that most of the people who will be visiting, if there's 4,000 a day, a large majority are not coming from Westmount. We don't have that much demand in Westmount for medical clinics. So they're coming from away. I know that when people are sick, they don't often want to take the bus, or, you know, they might want to get a lift. So I don't know if there's been an impact study on the traffic and parking that would result from this initiative, which I'm not against the initiative. I just want to wonder what the impact will be before you make your final decision. You know, this
is certainly, are you
almost through, but not
almost
quite.
through? Sir, why don't you finish, and then I think council will all have some comments on it.
I would expect to, like a financial analysis, how this will impact our taxes. As I'm just a taxpayer here tonight. It doesn't. There's no
building, right?
Yeah.
This isn't adding a tower of pediatricians with thousands and thousands of children with ear infections.
But I think when I go to the doctor, I don't then want to go to Park for lunch, or go. My wife doesn't want to go and buy a dress after. You know, you're going to the doctor. So this is not something, in my mind, this is not the type of clientele that's really going to feed the retail. And I'm more worried about the retail. So I want to make sure that you think about this and consider what's necessary to keep our village retail active. And we know it's been challenged a little bit lately. And so I'm hoping that what we're doing here will not make it worse. Okay. So now if there's a parking problem created, and we're talking about the residents like Mr. Wertheimer and others, but I'm thinking more also of the people who would want to come and shop in Westmount. And if the word gets out, don't go to Westmount, you can't even park, you know? So you have to keep a balance there. So I'm just hoping that you're considering this in your analysis, all right? I'm almost finished.
Okay.
So I'm just saying, so think carefully about it, because when the genie's out of the bottle, you can't put it back in. So if you decide we're going ahead with this, and it turns out there's 100 doctors and nurses, and then you say, oh, geez, we made a mistake. It's too late. You can't go back and say, all you people have to clear out, so it's a really important decision you're making, and I appreciate that.
We take this decision very seriously.
So that's all I'm asking tonight, and thank you for your time.
Thank you for your feedback, your commentary on parking. And I think if you see from, I don't know if you ever received any complaints while you were on council, but so at the corner of Melville and Sherbrooke would be considered a large medical clinic. There's 3 pediatricians in there. There's a GP upstairs. There's Dr. Roper downstairs, who I think maybe has 3 or 4 doctors with him. That is a constant flow. I mean, I know from when my children were young, I was a very frequent visitor of that clinic. And the parking, the traffic is managed. And I don't think that you should make decisions solely based on parking. If you look at Seaforth Medical Clinic, that's a brutal street to park on. But that's a whole tower. That's all medical clinics. And that's been people adapt, they manage, they take an Uber, they go all different ways. And so but to limit, and a lot of people do want a doctor. If you wanted a GP in this city, you wouldn't be able to get one at this point. And they wouldn't be able to establish an office in the Victoria Village because the cap is there. So I think what we're trying to do is let the decide more, the market decide, and the retail sector is very, very important to the Victoria Village, as you know, but it's hurting, and it does take people. A big part of the retail sector is also the office buildings. They come downstairs, they go to Myriad, they buy a coffee, they get a croissant, they go to the dry cleaner, they go up to Hog to pick up the paring knife that they need to get as well. So by adding, making sure, and we're not adding buildings. We want the buildings that exist to have tenants in them. We want people will ask, what do you want? I want every apartment that exists in the city to be filled, every house to be lived in, and every office space to be occupied. And I think for that, we're a decreasing population. We've been on the decline. Like our population has decreased over the years. We used to be 25,000 people. Now we're under 20. And it's important for us not to put in many roadblocks that weren't necessarily solving a problem. Like if you really are concerned about traffic in the Victoria Village, then we should shut down the metro. Like that's the major driver of traffic. Would that be a wise decision? No.
No, Mayor, my only point was protecting the retail.
And this is all part of the discussion.
You'll have to admit it is fascinating that Victoria wants to go to medical offices, whereas the one on the Chateau de Maisonneuve, whatever it's called, does not, and they're next door to the MUHC. So it's a puzzle for me. I just don't understand.
Yeah, well, it's also letting that's an owner of a building has asked to switch from commercial to residential, like the rest of the building is. So they want what on floors 2 to 5. Their ground floor will continue to be commercial, so you could put medical offices on the ground floor of Chateau Maisonneuve. At 2 to 5, they want residents that's on 5 to 18.
Again, I'm taking for granted that you are going to calculate the loss of tax revenue from that change, but this is not what we're here for tonight.
No,
but that could be several $1 million over 10 years. And so, how important is it to us to do that project if that's the cost? What's the cost? What's the benefit? That was my
yeah. And I thank you for your feedback, and it's thorough, and it's and I know you understand the process of this. So I do appreciate you taking the time to share that. Next question. Does anyone else want to comment? Councillor Peart?
I'm hoping that maybe I could benefit from because I wasn't here on council, even resident of Westmount at the time. We have 2 members of council who were part of this decision-making. How did you come to the quota? Was there a study? How do you get to that magical? How do you get to that magical number?
It existed.
No, we did studies. So they came by, my name is Cynthia Lellum. I live at 4550 St. Catherine Street West. I was on council for 26 years, and I was one of the drivers of that actual bylaw. We were very concerned. The hospital had come to us. They needed over 400 offices and clinics and spaces, which they now have in the previous Air Canada building and other sites on de Maisonneuve. And I also represent the merchants in Victoria Village. I'm the DG for the merchants. The merchants are in favor of it. So bring that forward. I also understand the residents. I live and I was the councillor for District 7, where we had an enormous problem between the WRC in its existing form before it was made into 2 arenas. When it was just one, we already had a problem. We had a problem with the Batchaw services, social services on St. Catherine for all their social workers parking, and then for the armory. And so for the first 14, 16 years of my time on council, it was nothing but parking complaints. When they started the construction of the WRC, we put in the blue stickers. So every street has a section that's only for the people who live there. Your problem is that when we did the resident stickers, it's all residents, and every West Manor has a resident sticker, a green one or a red one. So they can park in the Somerville area. When you have a colored sticker, it has to be the colored sticker that parks there. And they do enforce it really highly in my District 7. It's been very successful. It's easy for them. They drive by, they don't see a blue sticker, they see no sticker or another colored sticker, and they give them a ticket. So it has worked really well. We leave half of or a quarter of every street for other parking, so you can have guests, but it does give parking to the residents. After that was installed, I never had a complaint, and to this day don't have a complaint. So it is a really viable solution that should be looked at for that area. But the second stories of many of the buildings in the area are vacant, and it's very hard to rent. The medical offices can only go on the second floor. They can't go on the first floor. Second floor, retail doesn't want it. They want the ground floors. That's, it's already a problem. Some of the stores have stairs. So, access, universal access is always an issue, and they're trying to improve that. But the second stories are empty and need to be rented. And this would be a viable solution. It won't all be medical clinics. You will have ophthalmologists, you will have psychologists, et cetera. We already have some on St. Catherine Street, on Sherbrooke Street, sorry. That's why the cap of 35 was reached so soon. When we started off, there were 30. And we made a cap of 35. It's a bit different in each little zone. And they did, it was already, there wasn't a huge demand. And when we put the cap, it was interesting because it got reached. And it has been reached ever since. But there was a study done to try to do that ratio parking at a very minimum. What we see is that a lot of people come by Uber, or they, live in the neighborhood and walk over. You don't see a lot of, and on Green Avenue, we have several clinics, one closed, yes, but there's many others. There's also available other parking places in the neighborhood. There's one on the bottom of Victoria. There's a public parking garage that should be more promoted. It has a big P and an arrow, and, people can park there. So I think we need to do more promotion about the available parking, indoor parking that's in the neighborhood, and also encourage people, and that's what we do in the merchant, through the merchant associations, encourage people to come in other ways. You don't always have to come and park. And that's what we aim to do, but the merchants are in favor of the change and feel that it will help rent some of those currently vacant spots that aren't desired by others.
Thank you for your feedback and the context of the early adoption of this and the merchant's perspective on that. That's it. Yes, this was not.
We came up with that number, and it had gone dreadfully long before it was re-examined. But it was meant to be, anytime you make that type of change, it should get examined within the first 5 years.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? No? Anyone want to comment? Councillor Aronson?
I'll make this really quick, but I do want to add a perspective from a merchant, or rather a medical practitioner who was unable to be here tonight because of childcare constraints. This is one of the person who had told me about the moratorium on clinics before I even joined council. That's how I first was aware of this, and they were very concerned about the future of their practice. They're not a GP. The average client that comes in to see them is there for at least an hour. They don't see that many people. but their business was growing and they needed more space. And one of the major problems they ran into was that their clientele had become accustomed to coming to Victoria Village and wanted to continue to see this practitioner in Victoria Village, but they were having a awful time trying to find some other place that they may be able to expand into. And things got worse when their lease was coming for renewal, and their landlord said to them, "I'm putting your rent up. And if you don't like it, there's not much you can do. Because if you leave, somebody else will take your one spot that's available for you right here in a heartbeat. And you will not be able to move to any other location in Victoria Village because all the spots are taken. So here's your lease renewal." And they had no choice but to sign it. And they're lucky that this particular person had the resources to be able to pay that rent increase to stay where they are. Or we would have lost another valuable resource for our community. Changing this bylaw lifts a restriction on medical practitioners who want to do business in Westmount and want to service our community and want to spend their time and their energy and their money here in Victoria Village. If they leave, they may be replaced by another medical practitioner, but we're going to be at 35 and no more. There will be no growth. And meanwhile, we have an abundance of office space that is just going to waste. So much so that in other parts of the city, there are some landlords who wish to convert their office space where it's possible to residential. Because there just isn't that much demand for office space anymore. But medical services are ones that you cannot get from Amazon and you cannot get at a big box store. You have to go see someone in person. We have an enormous opportunity here to make a thriving and vibrant economy within our city that will help to support other businesses. So to limit that, or to continue to limit that, because we are concerned about finding, or we do not want to look at finding creative solutions to the parking issue, which is a serious issue, if there's one that will be addressed, seems, at least to me, a little bit short-sighted. But that said, we're having this public consultation because we do need to hear from everybody. Keep an open mind and consider exactly how we can best manage this issue. So I did want to bring the perspective of that medical practitioner to the forefront during this process, just in case it shakes something loose for any one of us or any one of you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Aronson, does anyone else want to, Councillor Peart wants to comment?
Because we've been speaking quite a bit about medical clinics and doctors' offices, but I just want to maybe go through the list of other professions that fall into this category, because I think it might add a little bit of context. We have dentist, imaging technologists, radio oncologists, chiropractors, audio prosthesists, podiatrists, nurses, acupuncturists. I'm translating from French in real time, sorry. Midwives, dietitians, social workers, psychologists, dental hygienists, dental technicians, audiologists, orthophonist, which I imagine is, I don't know the translation. Speech therapist, thank you. Physiotherapists, occupational therapist, medical technologist, respiratory therapist. So it is extensive and it addresses a wider range of services, which much more of us are going to be required on a regular basis. So I just wanted to provide a little bit of context
Of what it is. Yeah, it's beyond a GP. Next question, please, or comments.
Ronnie Cook here, 29 Rosemount.
Welcome.
Thank you. I wanted to come here this evening to let you know that, in my opinion, limiting medical professionals in Victoria Village or anywhere in Westmount is a mistake. And I wanted to commend council for trying to correct an error that was done by the previous administration. I think putting in those limits is wrong. We live in a community in which we're blessed by having the Glen Hospital, which is a super hospital. And it's only natural that around the super hospital, doctors want to, and all medical professionals want to create clinics, etc. I think that we're very lucky to have it. And I think that the parking issue is a serious issue, but can be addressed in a multitude of ways, including and not limited to discussing possibly with Metro, building some type of parking structure on their lot, et cetera, to increase the amount of parking. I think that there's lots of creative ways of doing it. I think that we are suffering right now, post-pandemic, all over the place throughout the island of Montreal. Office occupancy is down substantially. Not sure what's going to happen or when in the foreseeable future that's going to change. And I think that we can have a vibrant medical growth here in Westmount. And given the new laws that the government of Quebec is thinking of changing vis-a-vis with their new law that they've proposed, there'll be a lot of people who will go to other hospitals because the staff will be able to not lose seniority and move to an area closer to them. The head of the MUHC was commenting on that yesterday in the Gazette. So I think that we have a golden opportunity, and I wanted to commend council for being open enough to reconsider opening up and removing all limitations to all of the medical professionals. And I agree very much with what you were saying, Matthew Aronson. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for taking the time to come tonight. Are there any other questions in the room?
I would just like to comment on the parking issue. We already asked for a special sticker, like in the merchant opposed to that because, you know, they want their people to be able to park. So where you live, it's very, you know, there's no stores there. There is, okay, but there's very few stores, not compared to where we are. And if the merchant are opposed, now you're doing that to help the merchant. But, you know, if we give us special stickers just for the residents of this area, they're going to oppose also. So they were before. So they have changed.
Well, sometimes these issues evolve. Councillor Lalonde, we will restrain ourselves from getting in a debate within the audience, as you know.
I just wanted to also suggest to council that you might look at making some of the streets in that area one way and being able to have parking on two sides, which was something that we also did. We made Abbott one way and we have parking on both sides, and that alleviated a big problem in terms of lack of parking space, especially around apartment buildings.
Okay. Thank you for your commentary. Are there any other questions from in the room? And I'm not sure if we have any questions online. Pas de questions?
Pas de questions.
Okay. If there are no further questions or comments, we're going to adjourn this meeting, but I do think it's, I do want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. And obviously, often what we deal with in this city gets dictated, gets inspired by parking. And I think what this bylaw amendment is doing, and I voted in favor of this in 2014, and it's adjusting to the times. It's we're looking at this through a different lens now. We're looking at it. We know what the challenges are for the Victoria Village. Four of us at this table live in the Victoria Village, so it's not like we're immune to the challenges that are there and the vibrancy of the Victoria Village, and that we want it to thrive and survive. And as I said before, I think the goal from everyone here is that every space is occupied, and that our office buildings are full, our apartment buildings are full, our houses are full. And that will benefit the commercial sector, which is hurting, right? Obviously, the retail sector has dramatically changed. Every single person at this table or in this room has changed how they shop. So the commercial sector, the retail sector, and the city needs to adjust to that. And if we limit our decisions based solely on parking, I think we really limit the abilities of a vibrant sector. So I would just, I would close on that. I don't know if anyone else wants to add any comments on that, but I do want to thank you for coming. I certainly hear your concerns around parking and availability on the specific streets that are encased, I think, primarily between Victoria and Claremont and south of Sherbrooke Street. And I know they're small, and that is it's a residential sector that doesn't have, for the most part, does not have parking on their property, that they are parking on street property. So that's a challenge there. But and then in terms of the live and the impact of the community, I think, for that, it will likely benefit the commercial sector. It's not the type of building that's going to have large, I've spoken to the owner at length about parking. They have all sorts of stats on within the first year, how many cars typically get sold from the people that move into the building, that they often end up selling their car. And it is, but I think I'm not concerned so much about the live parking within the community, but I do think it's a great option. And I know a lot of Westmounters that are sadly moving over the border into NDG because that is a service that they want. So there's a ton of people moving out of 250 Clark and the 4300 into the live. So on that note, if anyone else wants to comment or have any other further, well, you can always reach us by email. And I think Maître Ferland made it pretty clear what the next steps are on this. So on that note, the meeting is adjourned.